It only took one item to push Demonology into the ranks of the strongest Warlock specializations. When paired with the tier 15 2-piece set bonus, Demonology becomes not only incredibly powerful, but also one of the most enjoyable specs to play. Yet, it remains the least played Warlock specialization. In this in-depth guide, we'll cover everything you need to master Demonology, from stat priority to itemization, best talents and glyphs, basic and advanced gameplay, openers, and how to properly plan and execute your burst windows. When it comes to stats, Haste and Mastery are both very strong, while Critical Strike should generally be avoided. Haste increases the uptime of the legendary meta gem, improves the proc rate of RPPM trinkets and boosts pets damage. Mastery, on the other hand, directly increases our damage output. The goal is to stack Haste to a specific breakpoint and then invest heavily into Mastery. It's important to note that Haste breakpoints are not fixed. They shift depending on available Haste amplification effects such as raid buffs, berserking, bloodlust, lifeblood and the legendary meta gem. Because we already generate a large amount of demonic fury from wild imps and benefit from reduced demonic fury cost through the tier 15 2-piece bonus, a heavy mastery build with a lower haste breakpoint is preferred. The commonly recommended haste breakpoint is 8094, which provides 8 ticks of doom while benefiting from the 5% raid haste buff and Glyph of Eternal Resolve. In best in slot gear, I might aim for 9507 haste breakpoint to gain an additional doom tick during the opener when all haste amplification effects are active. For gems, prioritize mastery whenever possible. 320 mastery on yellow sockets, 160 hit and 160 mastery on blue sockets, and 160 expertise and 160 mastery on orange sockets. If you are short on haste to reach your desired breakpoint, use the haste variants of the gems listed above until the breakpoint is met. If you are over the hit cap, use 80 intellect and 160 mastery in orange sockets instead. For reforging, I recommend using the Reforge Light add-on. Set your target haste breakpoint first, then reforge all remaining secondary stats into mastery. For enchants, refer to the best available options listed on the WoW Sims website. For itemization, prioritize gear with a combination of haste, mastery and hit, and avoid items with critical strike whenever possible. That said, item level is king, so don't hesitate to equip upgrades that aren't on a best in slot list, especially when replacing tier 14 gear, as they will always provide a significant DPS increase. You should aim to acquire tier 15 2-piece bonus as soon as possible. It reduces the cost of abilities and metamorphoses while Dark Soul is active, allowing you to sustain burst damage for a longer duration. The tier 15 4-piece bonus is also decent, however, tier pieces cannot be Thunderforged or upgraded. Because of this, you want to switch back to using tier 15 2-piece once you have 2 Thunderforged offset pieces. For trinkets, you want to pair Unerring Vision of Lei Shen with either Breath of the Hydra or Wusholei's Final Choice. Breath of the Hydra is more consistent and easier to play around, whilst Wusholei's Final Choice offers higher peak potential if you high roll, specifically if UVLS procs during the final 4 seconds of Wusholei's effect. Wusholei's also provides a large amount of hit, which can complicate gearing, giving you less options of not becoming overhit capped. Personally, I prefer Breath of the Hydra for its consistency and smoother gameplay. An honorable mention goes to Chai's Essence of Brilliance. While it is a weaker version of Breath of the Hydra, a normal or heroic Chai's outperforms celestial versions of both Breath of the Hydra or Wusholei's Final Choice. When making gearing decisions, always use WoW Sims. While Sims are not perfectly accurate, they provide a valuable reference point. This is especially important given the large number of items and item variants, celestial, normal and heroic, which can make it more difficult to determine the true best option without simming. Troll is by far the best race for Demonology Warlocks. It provides berserking, which grants 20% haste for 10 seconds on a 3-minute cooldown. In addition to that, trolls deal 5% increased damage to beasts, and 4 out of the 13 bosses on Throne of Thunder fall into this category. Unfortunately, for Alliance players, there is no race that comes close to trolls in terms of PvE performance. During Mists of Pandaria, alliance racials are largely geared towards PvP, with humans standing out primarily because their racial allows the use of 2 DPS trinkets. When it comes to profession, engineering and herbalism are the best choices. Engineering provides 3 highly impactful tinkers that boost damage and utility, whilst herbalism offers lifeblood, which provides a strong 2880 haste bonus cooldown. Herbalism is preferred over tailoring because at higher gear levels secondary stats scale better than primary stats, making off-stat bonuses more valuable than primary stats. These are the default talents I use 90% of the time. Soul Leech provides a constant absorb shield whenever you deal damage, offering strong passive survivability. Shadow Fury is an AoE stun on a short cooldown. It is extremely valuable in dungeons and can also be useful in raids for crowd controlling adds. For example, stunning the balls of lightning during the Latian encounter. Souling grants a permanent 20% damage reduction while a pet is active, making Warlocks one of the toughest DPS classes in the game. Another option in this tier is Dark Bargain, which provides complete immunity for a short duration, allowing Warlocks to solo soak mechanics. This talent shines on encounters like Lei Shen, where you can solo soak Static Shock, significantly reducing healer pressure. Burning Rush increases movement speed by 50% at the cost of health. Unbound Will is another strong option, offering an on-demand self-dispel. For example, it can be used on Jinrock to dispel ionization without healer assistance. All 3 grimoires are strong and seem very close to one another in best-in-slot gear. Grimoire of Service seems the highest, but it adds an extra cooldown that is on global cooldown, which can make burst setups feel clunky. Grimoire of Supremacy increases Felguard damage and is the option I use most often. I have achieved multiple 100 parses and rank 1 parses with it. It excels on encounters with short burst AoE windows where the Red Guard's Fellstorm truly shines. Grimoire of Sacrifice requires you to have the Latian trinket. It boosts imp damage and works best when you can maintain the 100% critical strike dooms on multiple long-lived targets such as on Council of Elders. In the final talent row, I always choose Archimonde's Darkness for the double Dark Soul charges. This provides flexibility in burst timing, and the shorter the encounter, the more powerful this talent becomes. When playing with Latian Trinket, Glyph of Eternal Resolve becomes mandatory. Although it reduces Doom's damage per tick, the increased duration significantly improves the uptime of the 100% critical strike effect. This results in more wild imp spawns. More imps means increased demonic fury generation, more molten core stacks, and ultimately higher overall damage. Another glyph I consider mandatory is Glyph of Imp Swarm. Without this glyph, wild imps spawn passively at regular intervals. With the glyph, you gain an active ability that summons imps at once. This disables the passive spawning and increases the wild imp cooldown by 4 seconds. While this results in fewer total imps over the course of a fight, it greatly amplifies your burst damage. It is especially powerful during the opener, allowing you to remain in metamorphosis longer thanks to the surge of demonic fury generated by the imps. The final mandatory glyph is Glyph of Carrion Swarm. It removes the knockback effect from the Carrion Swarm, which is important because in most raid encounters we generally want to avoid knocking adds away from the group or out of position. Demonology is powered by a unique resource called Demonic Fury. You generate fury primarily through most spells in caster form as well as from pets, specifically your Red Guard and Wild Imps. Demonic Fury is then spent in Metamorphosis, Demonology's signature stance. While in Metamorphosis, your damage is increased based on your mastery. As a result, the core Demonology playstyle revolves around alternating between 2 phases: Fury generation in caster form, often referred to as the downtime phase, and Fury consumption in Metamorphosis, the burst phase. Now let's break down the key abilities in both caster and demon form. Corruption is your primary damage over time effect in caster form and should be maintained at all times, not for its damage, but for the demonic fury it generates. In most cases, you only need to apply it once, as its duration is extended by Touch of Chaos while in Metamorphosis. Hand of Gul'dan has 2 charges and applies Shadow Flame, a stacking damage over time effect. These charges should not be used back to back. The optimal approach is to delay the second cast until just before the first Shadow Flame expires, typically when around 2 seconds remain, while weaving other abilities in between. This increases Shadow Flame uptime from 6 seconds to roughly 12 seconds. Because Shadow Flame's damage is calculated when the spell lands, you want to enter Metamorphosis immediately after the second cast to fully benefit from the damage bonus. While this is the ideal way to use your Hand of Gul'dan charges, there will be situations where you need to ignore Hog Weaving due to UVLS or other trinkets procs. In these cases, don't hesitate to enter Metamorphosis without casting the second charge of Hand of Gul'dan. Prioritize stronger burst windows over perfect Shadow Flame management. Shadow Bolt and Soulfire are your primary hardcast spells. Soulfire should only be used when you have Molten Core procs, which are generated through Shadow Flame, Wild Imp damage, or when the target falls below 25% health. Because Soulfire is your hardest hitting spell, it is best utilized in Metamorphosis, making Shadow Bolt the primary filler in caster form. You should only cast Soulfire in caster form if you have 5 or more Molten Core stacks or if your Molten Core stacks are about to expire. During movement, both Shadow Flame and Soulfire are replaced by Fel Flame, which is an instant cast and allows you to maintain Fury generation while repositioning. Hellfire is a channeled AoE abilities that scales with the number of enemies it hits. It becomes especially effective in multi-target situations, and I typically use it only when facing 4 or more targets. In Metamorphosis, Corruption transforms into Doom, which is the backbone of the Demonology specialization, especially when paired with Unerring Vision of Lei Shen. When Doom critically strikes, it spawns a Wild Imp, and by snapshotting a UVLS procs into Doom, you can generate an army of imps over its full duration. Your highest priority is maintaining the maximum possible uptime on the 100% critical strike Doom. The second priority is snapshotting as many stat amplifications as possible, such as Haste and Intellect, into that 100% crit Doom. Doom also benefits from the pandemic mechanic. When Doom is reapplied to a target that already has it, the remaining duration is added to the new application up to 50% of Doom's base duration. This is especially important during the opener, where we want to apply Doom twice to extend it to its maximum possible duration. Soulfire is your primary Demonic Fury spender in Metamorphosis when you have Molten Core procs. During movement or once you run out of Molten Core stacks, you should use Touch of Chaos instead. Touch of Chaos is instant and refreshes and extends Corruption using your current stat snapshot. In Metamorphosis, Hand of Gul'dan is replaced by Chaos Wave, which deals instant AoE damage rather than applying a damage over time effect. The choice between Chaos Wave and Hand of Gul'dan depends on enemy lifespan. Use Chaos Wave for short-lived enemies and use Hand of Gul'dan for enemies that will survive the full duration of Shadow Flame. Hellfire becomes Immolation Aura in Metamorphosis. It is no longer channeled and should only be used in AoE situation. Finally, Metamorphosis grants access to Carrion Swarm, an AoE frontal cone attack that can be used as part of your AoE toolkit. Dark Soul is your most powerful cooldown and should be used during trinket procs or boss vulnerability phases whenever possible. Thanks to Archimonde's Darkness, you don't need to use Dark Soul strictly on cooldown, instead you can plan its usage for optimal burst windows. The key rule is to avoid sitting at 2 charges. Ideally, you want to activate Dark Soul when you have high Demonic Fury, 500 or more, multiple Molten Core stacks, and as many active buffs and procs as possible to maximize burst damage. Imp Swarm should almost always be paired with Dark Souls unless you can get an entire cooldown before next Dark Soul is up. It's totally fine to delay its use rather than casting it on cooldown, as you will continue to generate Wild Imps naturally through Demonic Calling. Imp Swarm cooldown is reduced by Haste, so it should be used after gaining Haste amplification buffs such as Berserking, Bloodlust or the legendary Metagem whenever possible. Additionally, Imp Swarm should be cast in caster form before entering Metamorphosis to avoid wasting a global cooldown during your burst window. Doomguard is best used during the opener unless the encounter includes a vulnerability phase where boss takes increased damage. Similar to Wild Imps, Doomguard should ideally be summoned before entering Metamorphosis. For the opener, you do not want to precast any spells as we want to avoid proccing UVLS early. Use your pre-pot about 1 second before the pull. On the pull, cast Hand of Gul'dan followed by Corruption to get your dots rolling and begin generating Molten Core procs. Next, activate Berserking followed by Imp Swarm and summon your remaining pets, Doomguard and Grimoire of Service if talented. After that, cast your second Hand of Gul'dan, immediately activate Dark Soul and enter Metamorphosis. Apply our first Doom, then use Soulfire or Touch of Chaos while waiting for UVLS to proc. Once UVLS procs, immediately reapply Doom to snapshot the 100% critical strike effect. Continue casting Soulfire until you run out of Molten Core stacks, then switch to Touch of Chaos. If you are forced out of Metamorphosis early while Dark Souls is still active, cast 2 to 3 Shadow Bolts, use Hand of Gul'dan and re-enter Metamorphosis to continue bursting with Soulfire or Touch of Chaos until your buffs expire. If UVLS procs early, you need to adjust your opener accordingly. Immediately enter Metamorphosis, activate all the cooldowns and apply Doom twice. After that, continue following the standard priority system outlined earlier for the remainder of your rotation. On multi-target encounters such as Council of Elders, I prefer to delay using Hand of Gul'dan on the pull and instead cast both charges after summoning all pets. The goal is to delay the UVLS procs as long as possible. Ideally, this allows you to apply Doom to all 4 targets before UVLS procs. Once UVLS activates, you then reapply Doom on each target, taking advantage of the pandemic mechanic to extend the duration and ensure 100% critical strike Doom is rolling for the maximum possible time on all targets. Demonology does not follow a strict rotation, and to a large extent how you play it is up to personal judgment and encounter flow. That said, here are some general recommendations. After the opener, the core gameplay revolves around maintaining Corruption and Doom on your target. You will spend most of your time casting Shadow Bolt to generate Demonic Fury, and you should Hog Weave whenever you have 1 charge of Hand of Gul'dan available, and the second charge will be ready within 5 seconds. You generally want to enter Metamorphosis immediately after casting your second Hand of Gul'dan. If your current Doom does not have a UVLS snapshot, it's often worth staying in Metamorphosis for at least 7 seconds in case UVLS procs during that window. You should also aim to enter Metamorphosis at 900 or more Demonic Fury to avoid overcapping Fury. The ideal burst window occurs when several conditions line up. You have 500 or more Demonic Fury, high Molten Core stacks, Imp Swarm and Dark Soul are ready, Hand of Gul'dan charges are available, and you have trinkets or legendary meta gem procs. In this scenario, you cast Hand of Gul'dan, activate Imp Swarm, cast the second Hand of Gul'dan, use Dark Soul and then enter Metamorphosis. From there, spam Soulfire until all Molten Core stacks are consumed and then switch to Touch of Chaos. Outside the opener, this perfect setup won't happen often, but your goal is to check as many of the boxes as possible, at a minimum having 500 or more Demonic Fury and high Molten Core stacks during trinket procs or boss vulnerability phases. For sustained AoE against long-lived targets, apply 100% critical strike Dooms and Corruptions to each enemy and use Hand of Gul'dan to maintain the Shadow Flame effect. The massive Demonic Fury generation from Wild Imps spawned by guaranteed crit Dooms allows you to remain in Metamorphosis for extended periods, repeatedly casting Immolation Aura, Soulfire and Touch of Chaos to maximize damage. For short-lived burst AoE, the focus shifts to Radsgard Fellstorm and high-impact Metamorphosis abilities such as Chaos Wave, Cadence Swarm, Immolation Aura and Void Ray. And that wraps up the Demonology guide for Throne of Thunder. Let me know in the comments which specialization you'd like to see next, Destruction or Affliction. If you found this guide helpful, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more Mists of Pandaria classic content. And if you'd like to support the channel, you can join and become a member. Thanks for watching.